The wind in Baker City, Oregon, possessed a cruel and jagged edge. It was sharp. It was relentless. It was completely indifferent to a person's history. The year was 1886. The mountain air was a predator. It waited for the weak to stumble. It waited for the lonely to break. Li Na clutched the collar of her heavy red coat. The wool was frayed at the edges. The color was fading into a dull, dusty crimson. It was the last surviving ghost of her life in San Francisco. Once she had walked through Chinatown with a husband by her side. Once she had felt the warmth of a community. Now she felt only the bite of the frost. Beside her, 4-year-old June shivered. His small, frozen hand was tucked deep into her pocket. He was searching for a warmth that wasn't there. The snow beneath their boots was packed hard. It was slick.
It was treacherous. It was unforgiving. They stood like statues in front of the general store on Main Street. The smell of cedar smoke drifted from the heavy wooden doors. It mixed with the rich, salt scent of cured ham. Li Na felt a sharp, hollow pang twist in her stomach. Hunger no longer felt like pain. It felt like emptiness. She had not eaten a full meal in 3 agonizing days. Her body was consuming itself to keep her heart beating. She reached into her other pocket. Her fingers brushed against the last few coins. They were cold. They were hard. They were terrifyingly few. She looked down at June. His face was as pale as the winter sky. His lips were a faint shade of blue. His eyes were fixed on a stack of fresh bread. He could see it through the frosted window.
He did not ask for a piece. He did not cry. He only watched. That silence broke her heart more than any scream could. Li Na swallowed the heavy lump of pride in her throat. It was a bitter, metallic thing. She led him toward the door. The bell above the entrance jingled. Of roasted coffee and pipe tobacco filled the room. It was a rough, heavy warmth. A group of men sat huddled around a pot-bellied stove. They stopped talking the moment Li Na stepped inside. The silence was immediate. The silence was a wall. It was suffocating. In 1886, a Chinese woman in a mountain town faced walls made of ice. The Chinese Exclusion Act had passed 4 years earlier.
Memories of the Rock Springs Massacre still haunted Chinese families across the West. Li Na knew exactly what could happen when fear turned into hatred. Anti-Chinese sentiment was a fire burning through the West. It burned hotter than the stove in the corner. Tension hung in the rafters like a coming storm. Li Na ignored the heavy stares. She kept her chin high. She walked straight to the wooden counter. The shopkeeper was a man named Ed. He had a gray, wiry beard. He had narrow, suspicious eyes. He did not smile. He did not offer a greeting. He looked at her as if she were a ghost or a thief. "How much for the rolls?" Li Na asked. Her English was careful. It was halting. Each word was a bridge she built with effort. 5 cents apiece, the man muttered. He didn't look her in the eye. He looked at her hands. Li Na looked down at her coins once more. She had enough for 1 roll and a small tin of lard. Or perhaps 2 rolls if they skipped the lard entirely. But the lard provided fat. Fat provided energy. Energy provided life. She thought of the long, frozen miles ahead of them. They had hoped to reach Pendleton. The mountain road was closing. The sky was telling her that time had run out. She looked at the shopkeeper. "1 roll, please," she said. She placed the nickel on the wooden counter. The nickel sounded loud against the wood. The man tossed a crusty, golden-brown roll onto the counter. He didn't wrap it. He didn't hand it to her. June's eyes widened at the sight of it. Li Na picked it up. The bread was still warm. It felt like a miracle in her palm. She handed it to him immediately. "Eat, June," she whispered in Cantonese. The boy looked at his mother. He saw the deep shadows under her eyes. He saw the way her cheekbones stood out. He was only 4. He broke the bread in half with his small red fingers. He held a piece out to her. Li Na forced a smile. Her lips were cracked and bleeding.
The dry cold had stolen the moisture from her skin. She pushed his hand back gently. "My son can eat. I'm not hungry," she said. Her voice was clear. Her voice was loud. She wanted every man in the room to hear her. She wanted them to see her strength. It was a lie she had told 1,000 times.
It was a lie she would tell 1,000 more. Jun hesitated. He saw the way her hand trembled against her coat. "Eat," she insisted. She smoothed his dark hair back from his forehead. Her hand was like ice against his skin. In the corner, near the stove, a man watched them. His name was Silas Thorne. He was a rancher from the valley. He wore a heavy leather coat. It was lined with thick sheepskin. His hat was pulled low over his weathered face. His eyes were sharp and gray. They were the color of the mountains before a storm. Silas knew what real hunger looked like. He had seen it in the eyes of his own mother. He remembered the drought of 77. He remembered the dust. He remembered the way his mother had grown smaller every day. He watched Lena stand perfectly still. He saw her watching her son eat. It was a look of pure, agonizing love. She didn't look at the other food on the shelves. She didn't look at the bacon. She didn't look at the steaming coffee pot. She just watched the bread disappear into her child. Silas felt a familiar, heavy ache in his chest. He lived in a world of hard men and hard laws. But he was a man of the earth. The earth does not care about the color of a person's skin. The earth only knows who works it. Silas stood up slowly. The floorboards creaked under his heavy boots. The spurs on his heels gave a soft, rhythmic jingle. The other men at the stove watched him. They expected a confrontation. They expected him to drive her out. Lena turned. Her body tensed like a cornered animal. She was ready to fight. She was ready to run. She picked up her small wooden trunk. It was the only thing they owned. It held a few clothes and her husband's memory. "Ma'am," Silas said. His voice was like gravel and honey. It was deep. It was steady. Lena didn't answer. She pulled June closer to her side. The boy hid his face in her red wool coat. "I couldn't help but hear," Silas continued. He stepped closer. He kept a respectful distance. He knew he was a large, intimidating man. "You're new to Baker City." "We are passing through," Lena said. She gripped the handle of the trunk. Her knuckles were white. "A hard winter storm is moving in," Silas remarked. "The mountain pass is likely already closed. By morning, no wagon will be able to cross that road." Lena looked toward the window. The sky was turning a bruised, ominous purple. She had no place to stay. The local boarding house had already turned her away. They told her they had no room for her kind. It was a polite way of saying they wanted her to freeze. Silas saw the flicker of raw fear in her dark eyes. It was the fear of a mother who has run out of options. He turned back to the shopkeeper. "Ed, pack up a sack of flour. Give me 5 pounds of bacon and a gallon of molasses. Add a crate of those apples from the cellar." The shopkeeper grunted. "That's a lot of supplies, Silas." "Put it all on my tab," Silas said firmly. Lena shook her head quickly. "We cannot pay you, sir." "I have no money for this." "I didn't ask for payment," Silas said. He looked down at the boy. June was licking the last crumbs from his fingers. The boy looked up at the tall rancher. "I run a ranch 10 miles east of here," Silas said. "It is a big place. It is a lonely place. My cook left for the goldfields last month. The men are tired of eating my burnt beans. I need someone who knows how to run a kitchen. I need someone who can keep a house. There's a cabin behind the main house. It's warm. It has its own stove. It has a bed with fresh blankets." Lena searched his face. She was looking for the trap. She was looking for the hidden price. In her experience, nothing was ever free for her people. She saw no pity in his eyes. Pity is a weakness. She saw only a plain, hard-working honesty.
She saw a man who needed help as much as she did. "I am a good worker," she said. "I do not take charity." "I believe you," Silas replied, "and I don't give charity. I give wages for work." He reached out a gloved hand toward the trunk. Lina didn't let go at first. She held onto her past with everything she had. Then she looked at June. The boy was shivering again. The warmth of the store was fading from his small body. She let Silas take the heavy box. "Let's get you out of the cold," he said. As they walked toward the door, one of the men spat on the floor. The sound was wet and disgusting. "Bringing them out to your place, Silas?" the man sneered. "You know how people feel about that. You know the law." Silas stopped. He turned his head slowly. He showed a hard, rugged profile. "I know the law," Silas said coldly. "It says I can hire who I please, and my conscience says I do not leave children to freeze. If you have a problem with that, come see me on my porch." The man went silent. He looked back at the stove. Silas led Lina and June to his wagon. Two sturdy horses waited in the falling snow. Their breath came in white clouds. He helped them up into the high seat. He threw a heavy buffalo robe over their laps. It was heavy. It was warm. It smelled of earth and animals. It was the warmest thing Lina had felt in years. They headed out of town. The wind howled across the vast Oregon prairie. The snow began to whirl in blinding circles. Lina looked back at the fading lights of Baker City. The town was a collection of flickering sparks in the dark. She did not know if she was moving toward safety. She did not know if she was moving toward a new danger. But she felt the weight of the bread in June's stomach. And for tonight, that was enough. The ride to the Thorn Ranch was long. It was treacherous. The snow began to fall in thick, wet flakes. They obscured the trail. Silas didn't speak much. He focused all his energy on the reins. He was fighting the wind to keep the horses on the path. Lina watched his hands. They were scarred, they were calloused. They were the hands of a man who built his own world. She thought about her husband, Ming. Ming had been a dreamer. He had come to Oregon to find gold. He thought the mountains would be kind to a man who worked hard. He died in a mine collapse in the Blue Mountains. He died in the dark. He died for a dream that turned into a tomb. The mountains were beautiful, but the mountains were hungry. They took men and gave back nothing but rocks. They gave back nothing but sorrow. Lina had spent a year washing clothes for miners. She had scrubbed the filth of the earth from their shirts. She had saved every cent. But the money always seemed to vanish. Rent was higher for her. Food was more expensive for her. The world was designed to keep her empty. "We're here," Silas said. His voice broke through her memories.
Through the white haze, a low house appeared. It was made of heavy timber. Lantern light glowed warmly in the frosted windows. It looked like a beacon in the wasteland. A large barn stood nearby. Silas led them to a smaller building. It was a one-room cabin. It was built from sturdy pine logs. He pushed the door open. The air inside was cold, but it was dry. It didn't have the biting dampness of the street. There was a small iron stove in the corner. A bed with a fresh straw mattress sat against the wall. "I'll bring some wood," Silas said. He returned moments later with an armload of cedar. He knelt by the stove. He started a fire with expert hands. Soon, the wood began to crackle. A soft warmth spread through the small room. It smelled of pine and hope. June climbed onto the bed. He fell asleep almost instantly. The exhaustion of the road had finally claimed him. Lina stood by the stove. She watched the orange glow of the fire. Her hands were finally beginning to thaw. The pain of the returning warmth was sharp. It felt like needles under her skin. Neither of them spoke. They simply watched the fire. Outside, the wind battered the cabin walls. Inside, the silence felt strangely peaceful. True kindness does not always need a speech. Sometimes, kindness is just a dry room and a fire. "There's a pump at the main house for water," Silas said. "Breakfast for the men is at 6. They are rough men. They work hard. But they aren't bad men. They will respect you if you feed them well." Lena nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne." Silas paused at the door. He looked at her red coat. It stood out against the dark cabin wall. It looked like a single drop of blood in the snow. "The name's Silas," he said. "And you don't have to lie about being hungry here. There's plenty in the larder. A mother shouldn't have to starve for her son to live." He closed the door behind him. Lena sat on the floor by the stove. She watched the flames through the grate. She felt a single tear track through the dust on her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. She was too tired to be strong for just 1 minute. True strength is not the absence of tears. It is the ability to cry and still wake up to fight. The next morning, the ranch was a hive of activity. Lena was up long before the sun. She found the kitchen in the main house. It was a disaster. There was grease on the walls. There were muddy boot prints on the floor. The men had been living like animals in a storm. She rolled up her sleeves. She found a broom. She found a scrub brush. By 6 o'clock, the kitchen was transformed. The smell of frying salt pork filled the house. She had made a large pot of strong coffee. She found rice in the back of the pantry. She boiled it until it was soft and comforting. 4 ranch hands filed into the room. They were big men. They had loud, booming voices. They stopped abruptly when they saw Lena. They looked at her as if she were an alien. "Who are you?" one asked. "I am the cook," Lena said. She didn't look down. She didn't apologize for being there. She began plating the food. She gave each man a mountain of potatoes and pork. She gave them the rice she had prepared. The men sat down and began to eat. They were hungry. They were cold. One man looked up and grumbled, "This is the best breakfast we've had in years. The pork isn't burnt. The coffee doesn't taste like mud." "Thank you," Lena said. She went back to her work. As the weeks passed, a rhythm developed. Lena cleaned the house until it shone. She mended the men's clothes. She turned their rags back into garments. Jun followed Silas around the ranch. The big man was patient with the boy. He showed Jun how to feed the chickens. He showed him how to brush a horse. He taught him the names of the birds that stayed for winter. Jun's face began to fill out. The sickly paleness left his cheeks. He started to laugh again. The sound of a child's laughter was new to the Thorne Ranch. It changed the atmosphere of the place. It made the hard work feel like it had a purpose. Late one evening, Silas picked up his coat. One torn sleeve had been stitched. The work was so neat he could barely find the seam. He slowly ran his thumb across the careful thread. He knew those stitches were a form of gratitude. He did not smile, but he folded the coat with more care than before. Lena, however, remained cautious. She knew how quickly the wind could change. She knew people in town were talking. To many people in town, a Chinese woman living on Silas Thorne's ranch was an open challenge to their prejudices. It was a challenge to the order of things. The winter of 1886 did not let up. It became legendary. Across the cattle country of the West, that brutal season would become known as the Great Die-Up. By January, snowdrifts stood 6 feet deep. The mountain roads were completely buried. The cattle were huddling together. They were freezing where they stood. It was a catastrophe for the valley. Neighboring ranches began running out of hay. The animals were starving. The men were becoming desperate. Silas opened his own barn. He shared what little feed he had. "We can't let the animals suffer," he told his men, "even if their owners are fools." Lena stretched the kitchen supplies to their limit. She made soup from bones. She made bread from the last of the flour. She sent hot meals with every wagon that left the ranch. She went back to her old habits. She told Silas she had eaten already. She told the men she wasn't hungry. She grew thin once more. Her red coat hung loosely on her shoulders. She was a ghost in her own kitchen. One night, Silas came in covered in ice. His beard was frozen. His hands were blue from the cold. He sat down at the table and groaned.
Lina set a bowl of thin broth in front of him. "Where's yours?" Silas asked. "I ate earlier," Lina said. Silas stood up and walked to the stove. He opened a pot. The bottom was dry. He looked in the cupboard. The bread box was empty.
"Lina," he said softly, "you're doing it again. You're starving yourself for us. Why?" Lina looked up at him. Her eyes were large in her thin face. "Because that is what a mother does," she whispered. "If I die, it is just one more person the mountains took. But if my son dies, the future is gone. And if you die, this ranch falls. I am the only one who can be sacrificed." Silas felt a deep, painful admiration for her. He saw her dignity. He saw her fierce, unyielding soul. "You aren't alone anymore," Silas said. "I am a man who keeps his word. I told you that you wouldn't be hungry here." He went to the cellar. He brought up a jar of preserved peaches. They were the last of his winter treats.
"Eat," he said quietly. "Please." Lina stared at the golden fruit. She took a tiny bite. The sweetness was overwhelming. It tasted like summer. It tasted like mercy. Tears slipped silently down her face. One drop fell into the syrup. Silas sat beside her in the quiet room. He didn't try to comfort her with words. He simply stayed until the jar was empty. A week later, the sun came out. The world was a blinding, beautiful white. But the peace was broken. A group of men from town arrived on horseback. They came in a tight, angry line. Their faces were set in masks of prejudice. "Thorn!" Ed from the general store shouted. Silas stepped out onto the porch.
He carried his rifle in the crook of his arm. He looked like a king defending his castle. "There was a robbery at the mine office," Ed shouted. $1,000 in gold is gone. Someone saw a person in a red coat near the trail. Lina stepped out behind Silas. She stood tall. "I have not left this ranch in a month," she said. "Ask the men." "They are all in your pocket, Thorn," another man yelled. "We're here to search the cabin." "I'll shoot the first man who sets foot on my stairs," Silas growled. "The law doesn't give you the right to harass my people." "She's not your people, Silas," Ed screamed. "She's a stranger." Suddenly, June ran out of the house. He was holding a drawing he had made. "Look, I drew the mountains." He held up the paper. On the back were his practiced letters. A, B, C, D. He had been learning to write. The men looked at the boy. They saw a child. They saw a boy who looked like them in his excitement. The oldest man in the group looked at the drawing. He looked at June's small, hopeful face. The anger in the crowd began to shift. It turned into a heavy, shameful silence. Hoofbeats sounded behind them. The sheriff rode into the yard. His horse was lathered and tired. "The missing money was found," he announced. "It never left the mine office." The bookkeeper misplaced the bag beneath a stack of ledgers. No one spoke. The wind blew a drift of snow off the roof. Ed lowered his eyes. He couldn't look at Silas. He couldn't look at Lina. "Go home," Silas said. "Go home and remember this feeling. Remember how easy it was to blame a woman and a child before you do something you can't undo." The men turned their horses. They rode away without a word. "We should leave," Lina said that night. "They will come back. The hate is still there." Silas was cleaning his rifle. The metal clicked in the quiet room. "I'm not going to let bullies decide who lives here. I'm not going to let them win. Lina, I want you to stay. Not as a cook, not as a servant, as the woman who has made this house feel alive again. I want you to be my wife." Lina lowered her eyes. "The law will never accept it," she whispered. "The state of Oregon forbids it." "I know," Silas said. "The law may refuse to call us a family. The law may be blind, but I am not. I have already written to a lawyer in Portland. He is a man of conscience. He will prepare a will naming you and June as my heirs. This land will be yours. No man will be able to take this home from you. Li Na looked at him. She realized she had stopped being hungry for a place to belong. She had found it. She had found a man who valued her dignity more than the law. Yes, she said. The ceremony was small. It was quiet. Oregon law would not recognize their union for many years. But Silas found a traveling preacher. He was a man who believed in a higher law. He heard their vows in the light of the fire. Li Na wore her red coat. It was no longer a symbol of her loss. It was a symbol of her survival. June stood between them. The law did not call them husband and wife, but from that day forward, the ranch did. The men who worked for Silas called her ma'am. They treated her with the respect she had earned. Slowly, the town's whispers turned into a grudging respect. Some of the same families who had once refused Li Na now quietly left flour, apples, and bundles of firewood on the porch. None of them spoke, none of them apologized, but Li Na understood. Sometimes kindness arrived without words. Li Na never forgot the first warm roll that changed her life, and neither did the town. They saw the Thorn Ranch prosper while others failed. They saw a family built on the hard rock of integrity. June grew into a tall, strong young man. He had the mind of his mother. He had the heart of the man who raised him. Silas sold part of his herd to pay for June's tuition. June went to Portland to study. He became a lawyer. He spent his life fighting for justice. He fought for the rights of the workers. He fought for the people the law tried to forget. Li Na never forgot the hunger. She always kept a full bowl of fruit on the table. She never let a traveler pass the ranch without a meal. And every year, on the anniversary of that storm, Silas had a tradition. He would ride into Baker City. He would go to the general store. He would buy a fresh roll. He would bring it home to the woman in the red coat. He would break it in half. He would hand her the biggest piece. And she would finally say the words she once feared. "Thank you, Silas."
I am very hungry. This story reminds us that love is the strongest weapon. It is stronger than hate. It is stronger than unjust laws. Li Na and Silas built a life out of snow and dust. They proved that family is defined by who stands beside you. They proved that dignity cannot be taken. It can only be surrendered. And Li Na never surrendered. This is a fictional frontier story inspired by historical life in the American West. Some characters, events, narration, and AI-assisted visuals have been created or dramatized for storytelling. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe. Tell me in the comments, have you ever seen the quiet strength of a mother's love? Our next story follows a mysterious gold miner whose discovery changed one family's destiny. Thank you for watching.